Hello, Kayakus here. Here we are back with the second part of my mega devlog on Mendacium. In part 1, we talked about the main character, combat, as well as the player power systems with abilities, runes and rune circles. This time, we are diving deeper into more artistic changes, progression, as well as data management for this type of game. So let's start with the characters and the decision to switch from 2D to 3D. The animation process is quite similar due to the fact that I really like elemental creatures with a lot of floating parts, as well as the fact that my characters have separated limbs. So it just comes down to moving things around a little bit here and there without much rigging. The biggest benefit for me is that I don't really need to know how to draw a perspective. When it comes to 2D characters, you would usually either pick a 2D rigging approach or frame by frame approach. I was never a big fan of how stiff 2D rigging looks, and for a frame by frame animation you have to master perspective and know how the character is going to look in every frame while performing an attack or any action. With 3D, however, I can just move stuff around, rotate the characters, and not really worry about the perspective at all. So the first thing that I did was to switch existing enemies and characters to 3D, because let's be honest, the characters were not really the best. The results are mixed, some are fine, some are really good, like for example this boss over here, I really like that one. Just a disclaimer, most of the art is subject to change because I have to focus on the game eventually. Changing the models and sprites is quite fast and easy, and most of the stuff that doesn't look that nice right now will probably change over time. This is surely true for the NPCs themselves, since the model itself looks kinda fine, but I would like each NPC to look unique and not to be copy-paste or recolor of the same model. The NPCs are also now reacting to the player, rotating towards him when speaking and looking at him when passing by, which I think adds a little bit more flavor. This was done by simply adding a bone to the neck of each NPC and rotating it to a suitable position when the player is close. And to make things even nicer, you can talk to shopkeepers and traders in addition to accessing trade and shop UIs. With 3D models, however, another problem popped up, which is the sorting and clipping. If a 3D model is too big, it will naturally go through the 2D front layers, which doesn't look that nice. So my temporary solution was to just have two cameras, one rendering everything in front and the other rendering the back. An easy fix, but not the most optimized, since the screen has to be rendered twice, but for now I think it's fine. This really seems like it can be solved with some type of shader, but I don't really know much about shaders, so I guess nothing for now. If you know how to solve this with a shader, please let me know, because I'm really curious how this would work. Another visible difference is just the higher quality of art assets. I went through most of the assets, improved them and added some new ones, and there is just a lot more going on the screen now and feels more alive and populated. More bushes, grass on big rocks, and even ancient ruins that can be found here and there. The biggest change is that the big rocks don't have grass on each individual piece anymore, which made it look quite copy-pasted. Another big difference is the clarity of the scene overall, since I used some of the soft shapes to create fog and sun and make it so that the layers are not blending too much. I'm quite happy with the current state of art. The only thing that is triggering me is that with all of these reworks and redraws, some assets are not drawn in the same way, but oh well, as I said, at one point I have to make an actual game and the art stuff will be fixed and updated over time, I hope. New art additions are new chests, the currency sprites, nice ancient switches, ruin assets that were kinda the test for the new solution I have for drawing objects in perspective. And this is to literally make the object from basic shapes in 3D, screenshot it and then draw on top of that. It really sounds like cheating and a mega fush solution, but believe me, try it out if you are struggling with perspective. I did the exact same thing for this achievement for Ruins of Albion by literally posing actual bosses and then taking a screenshot and drawing on top of it. This nice zone title animation, the only frame by frame animation that I'm able to do, since I have to draw a complete title and then just erase parts for each frame. Actual particle sprites, since till now I have been using only these three for everything. Not that something is wrong with them, but I just feel like the particles were a little bit lacking compared to all of the other art in the game. And Ancient Treasure that offers a quest opens up and reveals the item inside it when you finish the quest. Although Green Hill's assets will probably be tweaked and updated in the future a little bit, Redwood looks amazing with the new assets, which I really had to point out because I really like it. Next thing is the game progression. The idea is to have leveling in the game and that the enemies and bosses reward experience. Higher level enemies will deal double or triple damage but reward more experience. That doesn't really matter if you don't get hit at all, which should provide some high risk, high reward gameplay for skilled players. The main currency of the game will be obtained mainly through selling materials, gathered with professions, but also doing some quests. I'm quite happy how all of this works together currently, however I feel like this will require some serious testing and feedback to get right. For a Metroidvania game, the map is like one of the most important things in the game. I really liked how Hollow Knight made you work for the map by finding the mapper NPC. I didn't want to steal that idea, but I still wanted something more interesting than just a basic auto-mapping system. So in every zone, the player will find this ancient stone with runes and the place where to put a stone relic key. The key will be either found in the zone itself or sold by one of the vendors in the villages. This means you can either solve a mini puzzle of finding a stone tablet and a key, or just stock up on those keys if you have a lot of money and unlock the map the moment you find the stone tablet. Now it's finally time to talk about something that took the most of my time, but it's really hard to appreciate, and that is the data management. As you have probably figured out already, Mendacium is not a simple game. There is a lot of data that has to be handled and connected to each other, which makes my life even worse when you think about how would you even save all of that into a save file. On top of everything, I had to think about the convenience as well as how easy it is to change, move and balance stuff around, since this will be a big project and with only one zone in focus already, it's getting pretty annoying to change things. So what is that data that I have to handle? There is item data and recipe data for handling the crafting. Then we have quest data, which has to have a set of different dialogues, turn-in character, actual quest objectives that might include killing enemies, reaching locations, or collecting different items. Also, the quest should be able to be provided by different characters and even environment and items, because I really like the idea of finding a lost letter item that starts a quest. Then, of course, we have the vendor items, like shops and trading, which should also know what was already bought if the items are one-time purchase. And last but not least, rune effects, rune circles, abilities, professions, all of the data should have some type of description, since you should be able to hover over it in the game and read more about it. How did I handle all of this? Well, with scriptable objects. If you are not using scriptable objects yet, you probably should. If your script inherits from a scriptable object, it will not be seen as a Unity component anymore, meaning you cannot put it on an object itself. However, it will allow you to create an instance of that class in the folder and store the data in its variables. So I made a base class called EntityScript.so with a simple entity name. Everything that is used in the data somehow is representing as an entity, and it makes sense that it has at least a simple name. From there, I used inheritance to share similar variables between classes and made a lot of different entities, like for everything that I had in mind till now. like obtainable data, which represents everything that can be obtained in the game and therefore needs an icon and a description, or an item data that also adds a shop price since it can be sold by a vendor. A recipe is technically an item and can be also bought from the vendor, but it also has references to different items it needs for crafting, as well as the item that will be crafted. Quest entity has a dialogue entity reference, as well as items, enemies, or locations that it requires, in addition to the rewards and the character that will allow you to turn in the quest. However, this is quite useless if the game itself doesn't do anything with this data. The most logical way for me is to use IDs in order to reference datas in the game, like this item over here has an ID 5, for example. That means that the player's inventory is technically just a list of IDs that represents items, which is much easier to manage. I said theoretically because there has to be more to a single inventory item than just an ID reference, so I made the normal classes like entity data stack that will manage the amount of a single item, as well as have some methods and events to make everything easier to manage. Quest data is another level of confusion since it needs subclasses for each objective type and a bunch of events to track the progress of each individual objective, as well as the whole quest. As a convenience, I made another scriptable object that will hold all of the different datas in a separated list. In this way, I can just use the list index as an ID. I can already see some of the confused faces thinking, what did I just listen to for the last couple of minutes? It might seem a little bit complex because it kinda is, but I cannot think of an easier way of handling all of this. This structure completely separates the data from the game itself and only requires me to make one reference connection, for example, which quest the character is giving. Everything else can be changed and tweaked in the data folders, which should also hopefully help with the translation of all of the text in the future. I simply can't wait for that. I have been working with this system for some time now and I'm quite happy with it. It is also quite easy to add new stuff to the game by just making a new entity and inheriting from one of many different ones that I already have. Enemy entity data can be used to store enemy health, but can also be used as a quest objective or even in the enemy journal that I will make in the future, which should have a collection of all of the enemies that you killed. After all of this, the only thing left is to actually work on finishing the demo. This includes a lot of minor tasks that are not that interesting, but they're there, like controller support, UI stuff like ability and recipe unlocks, because the player has to know that he did something with an action, inventory scrolling, a complete switch to controller-based UI with this selection box that shows what is currently selected, so that I don't have to program UI twice for keyboard and mouse as well as the controller, and in-game UI redesign, which went through so many stages of being absolute garbage that now it actually looks good. And lastly, a death system that I still didn't quite figure out. When you die in Mendacium, you enter the spirit realm, which is kinda more peaceful version of every room, and you have to run to the room where you died in order to release your spirit and appear in the normal realm again. I made a nice animation for dying, as well as for switching realms, and I added some indicators to know where the enemies are in life realm and not spawn on top of one. I don't think there should be a money punishment or anything, since I believe that punishment for dying should be dying. I'm planning to explore the spirit realm idea more in the future by adding special items only obtainable over there, or unique enemies, bosses, characters, or even quest objectives. Let me know in the comments below what you think about the spirit realm idea and if you would like to see something else done with it. And here we are finally at the end of my 1.5 year development on Mendacium. It's so funny to me to look at the first devlog and compare it to what is it now, because everything changed a lot. I feel really good about the game and its direction. The combat and the character feels amazing to control. The art is constantly improving, and the items, recipes, crafting, professions and everything else really makes it interesting to explore the world. It's quite interesting to think that the game is now in the same exact spot as it was in the last devlog 1.5 years ago. Since I said that I'm going to finish one zone and make a demo, and that's exactly what I'm doing right now. All of this is taking so long because I have to make important decisions all the time, which is really a reason why I'm only focusing on this one zone. I believe that if I figure out and test everything on this one zone and treat it as a complete game, it will not be that hard to repeat the process for other zones, especially if all of the systems are already planned and tested out. For now, I will be focusing on Ascendum until it's released, and I will not touch anything else apart from it. The project was already delayed and paused so many times that I cannot handle it anymore, so I think it's finally time to finish it and move on. I cannot really say how much time it will take, since I have a full-time job now and not that much time for development as I used to, but eventually I think I will get somewhere. When Ascendum is released, hopefully this year, for the next year I'm planning a Kickstarter campaign for Mendacium, where I will provide the demo I'm working on, since I'm not sure I'm able to finish the project in a reasonable time if I continue working like this, so I would need some help. Let me know in the comments below what do you think about all of the changes that I made in this two-part devlog and how better or worse the game has gotten in this time. I'm always happy to hear suggestions for anything, since now it's the time to really figure out the systems and important game elements. But that's it, Ascendum is waiting for me, so I'm done here, and until next time.